Our film begins in a small town where a young man named Simon lives. Simon is someone who has suffered abuse at the hands of his father and has spent years in and out of psychiatric institutions. After a long period of recovery, he decides it's time to find a job. He heads to a restaurant downtown for an interview. During his evaluation with the supervisor, she notices something strange. He hasn't worked in over 10 years. Simon explains that he was undergoing treatment for health issues, but the supervisor starts to get the wrong impression and considers rejecting him. Simon, who suffers from a psychological disorder, begins to hallucinate that it's his father speaking to him rather than the supervisor. The voice of his father tears down his confidence, making him expect rejection, just like so many times before. Overwhelmed, he starts to speak strangely, clearly distressed, and the supervisor, uncomfortable, thanks him for the interview and asks him to leave. Disheartened, Simon walks out feeling defeated. Meanwhile, at Kensal University, a man named Eddie sits in the cafeteria observing student activity. He's the former head of security and still acts like he's on duty, even though he was fired for his aggressive behavior. He notices a student stuffing a large amount of food into his bag, clearly against the rules. Eddie takes the matter into his own hands and brings the student to his former colleague, Jeremy. Jeremy, already skeptical of Eddie due to his past, is concerned that Eddie confronted the student without informing him. Eddie explains that when he asked the student to open his bag, the student refused, so Eddie sprayed him in the eye with an alcohol-based substance to teach him a lesson. Eddie insists that if Jeremy checks the bag, he'll find stolen items. Sure enough, Jeremy discovers Eddie was telling the truth. Still, Jeremy tells his assistant to release the student and escort him out. Eddie is furious, but Jeremy is tired of his reckless behavior. He warns Eddie that if he sees him on campus again, he'll call the police. Upset, Eddie notices how easily the bike locks can be opened and blames Jeremy for not addressing the issue. Jeremy dismisses him coldly, telling him he's failed in life and needs to start over. Humiliated, Eddie leaves. As he gets to his car, he sees a parking ticket. It turns out he parked in a staff-only spot. Frustrated, he drives home. When he arrives, he spots Simon returning as well. Eddie finds Simon strange and avoids interacting with him. Simon lives with his sister, Dee Dee. She asks how the interview went, and he tells her it didn't work out. She's deeply worried about him. His life still lacks stability, and she fears their father's influence still lingers. She tells Simon she's running late for work and needs to go. Simon visits his psychiatrist and explains that the medication he's taking is causing him to see things that aren't real. The doctor advises him to be more careful and take better care of himself. After the session, Simon leaves and begins walking home, lost in thought, wondering what to do with his life. On his way, something strange catches his attention. He hears a girl screaming. Alarmed, he moves closer and sees a man violently dragging a young woman into a car. He's kidnapping her. Simon freezes. He's overwhelmed and unsure of what to do. His mind races with doubt, convincing him he won't be able to help. But then, summoning his courage, he decides to intervene. Unfortunately, the car speeds away before he can get close. He tries to catch a glimpse of the license plate, but it's too blurry. He was running, and the car was moving too fast. Later that night, Eddie is at home storing some important items in a safe hidden behind a clock. As he sits down to rest, there's a loud knock at his door. It's Simon. Eddie is immediately put off. He doesn't want anything to do with Simon because of past trouble, including run-ins with the police. Eddie sees him as a source of chaos. Simon pleads for help. He tells Eddie he witnessed a girl being kidnapped and just needs a ride to the police station. But Eddie refuses. When Simon tries again, Eddie cuts him off sharply, warning him to stay away or he'll call the police on him. With no transportation available at that hour, Simon has no choice but to walk to the police station. The walk feels endless. He's exhausted, and his thoughts start to turn against him, trying to convince him to give up, but he pushes through and eventually makes it. At the station, Simon reports the kidnapping and waits to speak with Detective Glover. He describes the girl and gives a vague description of the kidnapper, though his memory is hazy due to the medication. He also mentions the license plate number, but can't recall it clearly. Detective Glover begins to suspect that Simon may be mentally unstable. She listens patiently and thanks him for coming in, promising to look into the matter. But after he leaves, she investigates Simon's background and finds out he's mentally ill has attempted suicide multiple times, and takes medications that cause hallucinations. As a result, she dismisses his report and doesn't pursue the case seriously. Simon returns home, takes his medication, and looks out the window, where he sees his neighbor, Eddie. The intrusive thoughts begin again. He starts to believe the police ignored his report, that they aren't doing anything, and that the girl might already be dead. Simon tries calling Detective Glover to ask if there's any update about the girl, but she doesn't answer. He starts to suspect she figured out who he really is, and is ignoring him on purpose. He leaves her a message, insisting that he's not imagining anything, and that they have to find the girl. Later, Glover calls back and tells him she checked the license plate number he gave her and found that the car had actually been towed from a completely different location. Simon grows frustrated and feels like everyone is treating him as if he's crazy. He hangs up, deeply discouraged. Meanwhile, Eddie is at home gambling. He receives a call from a hospital. His doctor wants him to come in for more tests, saying he may have suffered a minor heart attack. But Eddie doesn't seem to care. He wins a round, hangs up, and keeps playing. Then, in a reckless move, he bets all his money and loses everything. Angry and deflated, he hears another knock at the door. It's Simon again. This time, Simon tells Eddie about the girl and how no one at the police station took him seriously. Eddie is skeptical, but when Simon mentions that he always thought Eddie was a cop who could help, Eddie softens and invites him inside. Simon starts retelling what he saw, though his thoughts are scattered and filled with confusion due to his condition. Eddie, trying to help, takes the partial license plate Simon remembers and begins checking various combinations on several online databases. They end up with 6 possible matches, but they don't have enough money to access the full information, so they head out to try another approach. They visit a university surveillance center, and Eddie asks the woman at the front desk for help, claiming the license plate might belong to a car causing trouble on campus. The woman refuses. She says she's not allowed to share surveillance data. Simon starts to panic. He believes every second counts, and that the girl could die if they don't act fast. He loses his temper and lashes out, scaring the employee. She calls the police, and Eddie quickly pulls Simon out before things escalate further. Outside, Simon apologizes for his outburst. Eddie makes a distinctive clicking sound with his pen, something Simon finds oddly satisfying. Then Eddie asks Simon to show him exactly where the kidnapping happened. Meanwhile, the police receive a report of an altercation at the surveillance center involving 2 men, one of whom is identified as Simon. This time, Detective Glover starts to take the situation more seriously. At the location Simon pointed out, they struggle to find clues. Simon can't recall any clear details. Eddie takes him to an area where several women are working the street. As they approach, the women assume they're broke and try to avoid them. Eddie flashes a badge and asks one of them if she knows of any girl who recently went missing. They explain they're investigating a disappearance and trying to help. One of the women doesn't know anything and brushes them off. But as Eddie and Simon return to their car, a man suddenly attacks them, smashing the car and dragging Simon out. It turns out the man is connected to the women in the area, and their leader is furious that strangers have been asking questions. She threatens them, warning that if she sees them again, she'll kill them. Eddie tries to explain that they're just trying to help find a missing girl. After a tense moment, she lets them go. Eddie, frustrated by everything that's happened, snaps. He tells Simon he's done with this search and orders him to fix the car. Simon walks away, crushed and discouraged. Eddie considers going back to drinking, but can't shake the feeling that he should help. Moments later, he changes his mind, picks Simon up, and apologizes for being harsh. He tells him he's in, and he'll help him find the girl. Eddie then visits his old colleague Jeremy and asks him for a favor. Jeremy is clearly annoyed at seeing him, but Eddie threatens to expose Jeremy's secret relationships with staff members unless he helps. Nervously, Jeremy agrees, on one condition, that Eddie never shows his face on campus again. Jeremy then gives him the list of possible license plate matches. Back with Simon, Eddie explains they now have 6 possible leads. But before they go chasing them, he tells Simon that if he really wants to help people, he has to learn to talk to them without fear. He coaches him on making eye contact and building confidence. Then they set off. After exhausting every option, they finally meet the owner of the last plate on the list. The man tells them his car was in an accident a while ago and got towed. He points them to the junkyard where the car was sent. There, they meet Kurt, a scrapyard worker. He tells them the car's been in the lot for a while, but he's not sure where exactly. He leads them into the scrapyard to look. Meanwhile, Detective Glover arrives at the campus security office. She starts questioning the staff about the earlier incident and requests the surveillance footage to confirm whether Simon was actually there. Back at the scrapyard, Eddie and Simon finally locate the car, but its plates have been removed. Simon becomes visibly upset, realizing that without the plate number, they have no way to trace the girl. Then, he hears a scream in the distance. He's convinced it's the girl calling for help from a nearby car. He rushes off to search, but Eddie tries to calm him down. Simon's mind starts spiraling, overcome by his thoughts and fears, and he runs off alone. Kurt watches, concerned. Later that evening, Simon eats dinner with his sister. She tells him she's struggling to cover their expenses and insists he needs to get a job. He doesn't respond, gets up silently, and heads to his room. When he sees that his room has been cleaned, he gets upset. His sister explains she just wanted to help, but he tells her not to touch his things again, that he'll take care of himself and doesn't want anyone interfering. She lets him know she's heading to work and quietly leaves. That night, Eddie is at home, getting ready for bed, when someone sneaks in behind him and knocks him unconscious. At the same time, Simon is sitting in his room, drinking, when he notices something strange. He sees a mysterious figure moving silently inside Eddie's house. His instincts kick in. He realizes it's the same man who kidnapped the girl. The attacker begins beating and torturing Eddie, trying to extract information from him, unaware that Simon is also inside the house. Simon makes a sudden noise to distract him, giving Eddie the chance to grab his weapon. Simon rushes in, takes the gun, and points it at the man, demanding to know where the kidnapped girl is. But the man lunges at Simon, and without thinking, Simon pulls the trigger. A shot echoes through the house. The man collapses, dead. Simon is shaken, panicking. He doesn't know what to do. He grabs the attacker's phone and rushes to help Eddie, dragging his injured body to the car. He drives to his sister Dee Dee's workplace, hoping she can help. Meanwhile, a police report is filed. Shots fired in the neighborhood. Officers rush to the scene and discover a body, but the bullet wound to the head makes it impossible to identify the man. Suspicion begins to circle Simon. Back at the salon, Dee Dee has just finished with a client when she hears a noise near the back entrance. She opens the door and is shocked to find her brother and a badly injured Eddie. Frightened and concerned, she quickly brings them inside. Dee Dee, a nursing student, takes control of the situation. She tells Eddie to hold pressure on his wound while she finishes with her customer. But when she collects the payment, she notices blood on her hands. Panic sets in. She locks up quickly and returns to treat Eddie, stitching up the wound with her kit. When she's done, she hugs him tightly, relieved that he's okay. Eddie tells her about the kidnapped girl, and Dee Dee believes him, but urges him to let the police handle it from here. Eddie agrees, but Simon refuses. Suddenly, police arrive at the salon. They knock, demanding to be let in. Dee Dee agrees to stall them, buying Simon and Eddie time to escape. As she delays the officers, Eddie checks the dead man's phone and finds only 2 contacts. He calls one. It turns out to be linked to Kurt, the scrapyard worker. They rush off to find him. Dee Dee keeps the officers talking, trying to play for time, but they grow suspicious and threaten to force their way in. When they break in, they find blood on the floor and Eddie's car parked outside. Realizing something is wrong, they begin a search. By that time, Eddie and Simon have already boarded a bus and escaped. They arrive at the scrapyard and wait for Kurt. When he shows up, they confront him, accusing him of being involved. He tries to play dumb, but they knock him out and tie him up. When he comes to, Eddie interrogates him, but Kurt refuses to talk. Simon notices a familiar-looking watch, just like Eddie's. He opens it and finds a hidden compartment containing a passport. It belongs to the girl they've been searching for. Overwhelmed with emotion, Simon feels they're finally close. But his mental state begins to spiral again. In a sudden delusion, he sees Kurt as his father, the man who hurt him in the past, and becomes violent. Eddie stops him just in time and takes over the questioning. When Kurt still refuses to cooperate, Eddie pours alcohol into his eyes. Screaming in pain, Kurt finally breaks and confesses. The kidnapper worked alone. There were no partners. They were trafficking women, selling them to the highest bidder. the trafficker used to collect the girls' passports so they couldn't escape. He only knew one address, a location where he regularly delivered the documents. After getting the info, Simon and Eddie alert the police and leave Kurt tied to a chair. Meanwhile, Detective Glover spots Eddie's car and is more convinced than ever that Simon is deeply involved in something dangerous. But suddenly, she gets a call from Eddie himself. He's reporting their location. She rushes there and finds the passports and Kurt still restrained, confirming Simon was indeed trying to find the missing girl. Simon and Eddie arrive at the address they got from Kurt. As they approach the house, Simon begins hallucinating again. He sees his father, who always belittled and humiliated him, making him feel weak and worthless. Eddie notices Simon slipping into another episode. He clicks his pen. The familiar sound calms Simon down. Eddie reminds him he's stronger than his past, stronger than the voices in his head. They enter the house together, searching for clues. One room contains a hospital bed and oxygen tanks. They're unsure if they're in the right place. Then Eddie finds files containing victim data, evidence that girls had been held there. Just when they fear they're too late, Simon hears a sound upstairs. They rush up to find a room filled with women's clothes, but no sign of the girl. Disappointed, Simon closes the door and they both head back down. As they sit together, trying to process what's happened, a strange woman suddenly appears from behind without making a sound. Eddie sees her and is unsure who she is. She walks away, and they quickly rush back upstairs to recheck the room. There, they discover a hidden safe. Eddie, using his old skills, manages to unlock it, and inside, they find the kidnapped girl. She's alive. Overwhelmed with relief and joy, they help her out of the house. But just as they step outside, the police are waiting. They're arrested on the spot. Detective Glover approaches Simon and tells him that his sister is at the station waiting for him. She thanks him for everything he did to save the girl. Eddie and Simon look at each other. Despite everything, they smile. They accomplished something real together for the first time. And that was our film for today. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.